What is Darwinian revolution?
Darwinian's Revolutionary was published on the year 1859 that is introduced by Charles Darwin. Darwin's revolutionary theory was that new species arise naturally by a process of evolution rather than having been created forever immutable by God. Traditionally, the Darwinian Revolution was a revolution in scientific thought that took place in the years following the publication of Darwin's finding on evolution.
What are some examples of Darwinian revolution?
From the earliest illustration featured in 1859 and the successive editions of The Origin of Species, Darwin's finches, also known as Galapagos finches or Geospizanae, are one of the examples of Darwinian revolution. It is a classic example of diversification by natural selection. These passerine birds also provide a number of related species, most of which are classified in the Geospiza and are related to American tanagers in the family of Emberizidae rather than European finches. These and the other finches struck Darwin's mind in September 1839 when HMS Beagle arrived in Galapagos Islands, later highlighting the concept that exploitation of different food resources leads to evolutionary divergence. Big diversification in Geospiza and the other bird species is influenced by heterochronic and heterotopic gene regulation throughout the craniofacial development according to new research.
The theory of evolution. Why are there still monkeys? One of the most common questions regarding the theory of evolution is, if humans evolved from apes, then why are there still apes? But we didn't evolve from apes, chimpanzees, or gorillas. We evolved from a common ancestor that was neither an ape, chimpanzee, or gorillas. Humans descended from a primate in Africa that existed 25 million years ago. These common ancestors split off into groups like monkeys, chimpanzees, and gorillas. Each group adapted to different situations. Natural selection shaped one branch into chimpanzees today. Then, it shaped another branch into humans.
The March of Progress. The March of Progress, also called the Road to Homo sapiens, shows a linear path. The starting point is a chimpanzee. Then, it depicts how we evolved from Neanderthals into modern humans. But as mentioned already, evolution is more like a tree. It starts with a thicker branch that represents a common ancestor. Then, new species branch outwards. Each branch is pruned and clipped by natural selection. The March of Progress leaves a misrepresentation of how evolution operates. Chimpanzees and humans are each other closest relatives, but humans didn't evolve from chimpanzee. We evolved from a common ancestor that we shared with chimpanzees. Overall, the diagram misrepresents the true branching of evolution.
The origin of giraffes' long necks. The ancestors of modern giraffes were animals similar to deer or antelope, with necks of ordinary length. However, because of the trees in their habitat were tall, those giraffes with slightly longer necks had an advantage over their shorter neck fellows. The longer necked giraffes reproduced more, so in the next generation, longer necks were more common. Over many generations, this process produced giraffes as they are today.
Process of Darwinian revolution.
After a 5-year journey to study plants, animals, and fossils in South America and on Pacific Islands, English naturalist Charles Darwin developed the concept of natural selection. In his best-selling book on the origin of species, he introduced the concept of natural selection to the world in 1859. The process by which populations of living organisms adapt and change is known as natural selection. Individuals within a population are naturally variable which means they are all unique in some way. This variation indicates that some people have traits that are better suited to their environment than others. Individuals who have adapted traits that give them an advantage, are more likely to survive and reproduce. These people then passed on their adaptive traits to their offspring. These advantageous traits become more common in the population over time. Favorable traits are passed down through generations as a result of this natural selection process. Natural selection can result in speciation, which occurs when one species gives rise to a new and distinct species. It is one of the processes that drives evolution and contributes to our understanding of the diversity of life on Earth.
Charles Darwin was a British naturalist who proposed the theory of biological evolution by natural selection. He also defined evolution as descent with modification, the idea that species change over time, give rise to new species, and share a common ancestor. The mechanism that Darwin proposed for evolution is natural selection because resources are limited in nature. Organisms with heritable traits that favor survival and reproduction will tend to leave more offspring rather than their peers, causing their traits to increase in frequency over generations. Natural selection causes populations to become adapted or increasingly well-suited to their environment over time. Natural selection depends on the environment and requires existing heritable variation in a group. The basic idea of biological evolution is that populations and species of organisms change over time.
So, in evolution, Darwin claimed that species can evolve over time. That new species emerge from existing species and that all species have common ancestor. In this scenario, each species has its own set of heritable or genetic deviation from its common ancestor, which have accumulated over lengthy periods of time. Branching events in which new species split off from a common ancestor result in a multi-level or tree that connects all living organisms. Darwin called this process descent with modification, in which groups of organisms change their heritable traits over generations. Today, we call it evolution. So Darwin's sketch above illustrates his point by demonstrating how one species can split into two over time, and how this process can occur several times in a group of related species or family tree. So natural selection is a process that occurs in nature. Darwin didn't suggest that organisms evolve. He proved it. He wouldn't be in as many textbooks today if it had been the beginning and end of his idea. So Darwin instead offered natural selection as a mechanism for evolution. So this method was elegant and logical, and it explained how populations may develop through time to become more suited to their environments by descent with modification.
Darwin's concept of natural selection was based on several key observations. Traits are often heritable. In living organisms, many characteristics are inherited or passed from parent to offspring. Darwin knew this was the case, even though he did not know that traits were inherited via genes. More offsprings are produced than can survive. Organisms are capable of producing more offspring than their environments can support. Thus, there is competition for limited resources in each generation. Offspring vary in their heritable traits.
The offspring in any generations will be slightly different from one another in their traits like color, size, shape, and etc. And many of these features will be heritable. Based on these simple observations, Darwin concluded the following.
So, in a population, some individuals will have inherited traits that help them survive and reproduce. Okay, so the given conditions of the environment, such as the predators and food sources present. Okay, so the individuals with the helpful traits will leave more offspring in the next generation than their peers. Okay, so since the traits make them more effective, yes, so at the surviving and reproducing, because the helpful traits are heritable, and because organism with these traits leaves more offspring, the traits will tend to become common, present in a larger function of the population in the next generation. Over generations, the population will become adapted to its environment. As individuals with traits helpful, the environment have consistently greater reproductive success than their peers. Okay, so Darwin's model of evolution by natural selection allowed him to explain the patterns he had seen during his travels.
What is the impact of Darwinian revolution?
So here is the impact of Charles Darwin's invention in the world. So he transformed the way we understand the natural world with ideas that in his day were nothing short of revolutionary. He and his fellow pioneers in the field of biology give us the insight of fantastic diversity of life on Earth and its origins, including as our own species.
What is the importance of Darwinian revolution?
The publication of Charles Darwin Revolution marked a watershed moment in both scientific and religious history. The book forever altered people's perception of biology, and it has had far-reaching consequences for modern science, religion, and other aspects of society. Charles Darwin allowed us to gain a better understanding of our world, which in turn allowed us to change the way that we think. Darwin Revolution's most important contribution to science is that he completed the Copernican revolution by developing the concept of nature for biology as a system of matter in motion governed by natural laws. The origin and adaptations of organisms were brought into the realm of science with Darwin's discovery of natural selection.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you learned something. Brought to you by BEAD 4X students, Rosalind Gerenjoy, Karen Dialan, Michael Paines, Canny Pearl Milos, Mary Anna Bubo, Alma Panner, Daphne Dumdum, Mary Grace Capua, Godfrey Afable, Roxanne Lauren, Leah Segara and Vernamy Kuadra.